So yesterday, 60,000 pages plus of government documentation around JFK's assassination got declassified and just dumped into the public with practically no organization. It's on the Government Archives website, and you can go through all the files yourselves, but they are not named with names. They are just a bunch of numbers. None of the documents have the text in them digitized, so give up on control Fing. You are not searching for shit. But still, that's a lot of information, so naturally, I'm curious. Hi again, fellas, and welcome back to Quite with a Y. Last night on stream, I was meant to play Happy Wheels for like the first time ever, but we ended up getting on the conversation of the JFK files. I pulled them up and people seemed interested, and so we spent like the next 3 hours looking through those instead of playing a video game. We didn't expect to find like earth-shattering new information or something that like completely changes our understanding of what happened to JFK. I was mostly looking for funny stuff, and there was plenty of that, not disappointed. Like one of my favorites was a report that somebody had found a hand grenade hidden inside of a hollowed out coconut, and apparently that was pretty standard for smuggling hand grenades into Cuba during the Cold War. I really could do a full video just looking at the silly stuff we found and some of the implications of it, but today I wanted to focus on one specific story that really caught my eye. One of the longest documents we came across was 186 pages, and it's basically a bunch of day-to-day reports from the early 60s. They seem to be like a case officer's interaction with a defector, or at least like an asset. In the document, he's called W.I. Rogue, or at least I think so. The text is not very legible in these documents. They did not scan them very well. But later, they just dox him and call him George Sanders. I don't know if that's his real name or an alias, but it's here. And I'm about to use an adjective I never thought I would describe a government document as. It's weirdly cute. Like, let me put down some context before I get in too deep with this. Basically, the subject, the defector, was in Frankfurt, Germany by himself for the most part, as to where he was being relocated initially. He was not talking to people much, didn't really have friends, and the only person he talked to on the regular was his case officer, his CO. And I don't know if the case officer himself wrote the reports, but in the way they're written, you can like see over the years the case officer getting like kind of annoyed and fed up with the guy to slowly like liking him more and more and worrying about his well-being. Like they just strike up a real friendship. Alright, let's get started, shall we? There's a lot of this. The CO met subject who had invited him to meet for lunch. They had a drink together and went to a Chinese restaurant. Chinese with 2 E's, no worries. The CO was afraid subject was getting ready to ask a favor or present a problem, but it turned out he merely wanted to visit with CO, whom he considers to be his only friend, at least in Frankfurt. Basically, the CO visited this guy a lot, primarily to give him resources, like a set amount of money every few weeks or so. He brought by like food, some furniture, basically making him comfy while they figure out what to do with him. The CO told the subject he would be leaving for the US probably in the first week of June and asked subject if they could have dinner at least one more time before he left. I kind of like this because they're mutually asking each other to do things together, man. I'm not trying to project anything but platonic vibes onto these interactions, but you know, it's heartwarming. And the subject thanked the CO by like giving him a few dollars, but also a French cigarette lighter as like a kind of memento. It's cute. They're giving each other gifts. Oh! The subject called the CO to meet again because apparently he had ran into some good luck. Apparently he was getting moved to a firm in Munich by the guy who was his boss. He was going to get $1,500 monthly salary, free living quarters in Munich. He's going to be able to maintain his apartment in Frankfurt. This guy hit the jackpot pretty much. Oh, and also absolute personal freedom of movement regarding work hours, dude. That's like a privilege these days you only get if you do my job. It was literally too good to be true. The CO just didn't believe him at first. He's like, I'm gonna need some paperwork. I don't believe you. Turns out he was not lying, bro. He's really got that shit. It comes up again that the subject's case officer was basically his only friend, and it's going to a few more times as we get further in. And their tone around making plans together just gets more and more enthusiastic. The subject said he would like to call CO soon. The CO told him he would be delighted to meet him whenever he has time. Throughout the background of all of this, they're still trying to figure out what to do with this defector long term. He's in Germany currently, but they're thinking about moving him to South America under the guise of a Soviet refugee. But then he'd also have to like speed run how to learn Russian in 6 months. The subject asked CO to meet up with him again over something fairly trivial that actually started to kind of tick the CO off. The CO came by one day giving the subject his money, but he warned him that it was his last time doing so. They had enough of a rapport at this time to start joking about the idea of the government trying to get rid of subject. The CO laughed in turn and said he would be glad to see the subject on his own, because he had no doubts that he'd be able to support himself. They had lunch and then promised to see each other again in 2 days. They're besties. The subject got his own apartment, was getting it repainted and wallpapered. He was really living living a life. You can see like receipts for some of the stuff that the subject was buying to prove to CO that he wasn't just squandering the money, or that anything he asked him to pay for wasn't just him trying to penny pinch or skim off the top. In a letter about the defector, WI Rogue, subject, whatever, there's talk of President Lyndon B. Johnson's economy drive affecting all agencies and departments and like kind of constraining them for money, and to use that to tell a subject that they can't give him as much as they have been. I feel that if we pay to have his lower denture repaired, we make subject a present of the household items listed and continue to pay him subsistence for a month or two after we notify him he's on his own, we will, I believe, get rid of him as cheaply as possible. I really don't want to see these two broken up, man. They were getting on and it just keeps going. The CO said he was disappointed the subject decided to stay in his current apartment and take over the DM300 rent himself. He wanted his buddy to take advantage of the money being given to him so that he could save up for the future. Rogue proudly announced he has more intensive efforts the last few weeks to sell 4 of his inventions. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, it became pretty common when the CEO came over that the subject would just be in the middle of tinkering away on some shit he was building. He's legit just a fan fiction builder, engineer, hobbyist, a super genius making nuclear reactors in their bedroom. And whoever's doing these write-ups had fun talking about these two and their relationship. CO told him he would never understand how such an obviously clever man, for so many years, could refuse to face up his responsibilities to himself and society and live in a dream world of get-rich-quick schemes. Subject put on what is now a familiar act, in which he acts terribly hurt because CO, his one true friend, does not have faith in him. CO told Subject that he's a great actor and that he'd think more highly of him if he would think about going to work like a normal person and fiddle with his inventions at night. A lot of these are just entries of the CO and Subject doing like really benign things. It almost always starts with he gave him 2 weeks worth of money, they'll talk a little bit and then go to lunch, and then sometimes they'll just do something really plain and normal after. CO dropped in and paid Subject 2 weeks subsistence, and after a short chat took him to lunch. I'm quoting this next part. CO and Subject spent several hours window shopping and just generally bumming around. The Subject's morale was greatly improved, like you're playing fucking Mass Effect, dude. Though you start to see the Subject having worries that he knows he'll be turned loose, asking for some advanced warning from CO before it happens. They were getting further and further along on what to do with the Subject, and Rogue told his case officer that he wanted to repay all the money that had been spent on him. CO went all 3-letter government agency and said, do not repay that money, it will foul up our books. Just work hard and lead a decent life. That's how you can pay us back. A very rare thing for the United States government to do. I do love how often the CO comes by to give him not just money, but also cigarettes. Oh, sorry, cigarettes, coffee, and not alcohol, booze. That's the official government term. There's a few entries where the CO comes by and the Subject seems to always be in good spirits when he sees him. He's also been making progress with his inventions, actually completing some and being able to use them for stuff. He even apparently made an electric dictionary, which I can only assume was the first dictionary you could type a word in to search for. He even successfully applied for a patent for a new type of soup dish. The case officer basically just started praising him up the wazoo because he thought if he didn't, the Subject was gonna spiral hard because he was doubting his own ability already. The case officer genuinely does give good advice sometimes, like he seems to actually care about this guy and how he's doing. Like the Subject ran out of funding for one of his inventions and the CO is like, go find a person who takes pitches and will fund them if they think they're good. The Subject does that and actually manages to get an audience with a guy at a research and development firm. This was when he made that electric dictionary, by the way. There were plans to originally try to get this dude to South America when everything was said and done, but it kind of circled back several times to him staying in Germany instead because he already knew the language. In June 1963, the CO dropped by to find the Subject in good spirits, but who also said he felt like a charity case. Didn't think he had much longer on the agency's hands. This is when he found out the 3 possibilities for what he could do in his future. I don't know if he had a say in them or if it was just up to the agents who were handling him and their discretion. He could stay in Germany and get a job. He could learn Russian in 6 months and then move to South America, or he could maybe go to Chile. A lot of these meetings end up just being them hanging out. Like there's one default exchange they'll have. The CO will either be giving the guy money or telling him a progress report on his immigration story, and then they'd start discussing things normally, like people who are friends not from government subterfuge and espionage. I love defecting! I love committing treason! CO met Subject and found him to be in a blue funk. The Subject thought that like his German documentation was trash. He was scared he was gonna get kicked out as a refugee, and his case officer had to make like a hurt comfort fic and assure this guy that it was gonna be alright, as long as the current German government stayed in power, that is. Regime changes never happened in the Cold War, so shouldn't have been an issue. Despite thinking that he was a charity case, the Subject seemed to be in no hurry. He seems to be enjoying his stay with us, and his CO is worried that it might be difficult to get rid of him when the time came to make the big move. move. Still, he made plans to visit the next week. He's a good guy. There's discussion that he would get picked up by Interpol if he went over country lines. Subject told the CO that he had gone to the Colombian consulate at 10 a.m. and found it to be a one-man, or rather one-woman operation. He said he found the representative to be a pleasant but rather incompetent German woman about 50 years of age. It's like, she seemed nice enough, but she's a fucking idiot. As things were shaping up, it really did look like bro was gonna end up getting shipped out to Colombia. CO dropped in to see Subject and found him busy with one of his inventions. He was paid subsistence and given cigarettes and coffee. Now, this is where some of the complications in his immigration came up. The case officer explained that since Subject is an exceptional case and not a bona fide refugee, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of normal immigration channels without chancing being involved in fraud. And they only had one shot at this because if he failed his first immigration application, anywhere else they tried would be able to see that they had already failed once. I really do wonder what this guy was able to give the US government in the Cold War, because they are going out of their way for him. Like, they are giving him a lot of money every 2 weeks from what it seems, and they are continuing to, like, just take care of him. They continue to keep him cozy and give him a government-assigned best friend so he's not lonely. The case officer dropped by to see Subject and pay him subsistence. He was in good spirits, but did not seem as restless as usual. He confided to case officer that he is hoping he won't have to do any running around regarding his immigration as long as the weather stays as bad as it is. He was reasonably satisfied with his lot in life and only asked the case officer drop by a little more often if possible because he gets lonely. I hope the weather stays shit so you can't make me leave the country. And I think this is where we find out that his name is Mr. Sanders, because it's at the top of this letter addressed to a Sanders, right next to a memo with the subject's code name, WI Rogue. It also does bring up its own questions, man. I was about to get my order wrong on where something came from. I almost said that this looked like documentation you'd find as collectibles in a game. Then I realized that this is the documentation that those collectibles are based off of, and I'm a complete idiot. See, I don't usually handle official government documents that had to be declassified after 60 years. I usually look at Mass Effect lore. Just wanted to drop you this line to tell you again how much I enjoyed our conversation the other evening. My greatest experiences in Germany are the different people I meet, and it is always very pleasant to talk with someone such as yourself who has such an interesting background. My friend felt rather silly at his attempted joke, and God, I would love to know what this joke was. The next time, he either will have less to drink or will think more before clowning. If he doesn't have less to drink, that thinking part's still gonna be hard, man. This is how I know the guy doing all these write-ups was having fun with it over time, because he would just add his own little flourishes. Okay, we get it. Creative writing authors can join the FBI too. Government surveillance has a position for everybody. The case officer dropped in to deliver some Christmas cheer to Subject and brought presents too. He gave him his Risaweiss and Enmeldebedestegun. I can't speak German. I looked it up. That first one is a travel permit and the second one is a piece of paper that proves you live at an address you say you do. Almost this entire document is in English. These words have English equivalents. Why didn't you translate them? Now I have to look like an idiot for saying them all stupid-like. The subject told his CO he had a feeling headquarters would advise him to turn him loose without any additional help. He was worried it'd be difficult to get a job and apartment on short notice, but his buddy, the CO, was there to comfort him and tell them that they just don't make a habit of kicking people out in this economy. They don't want to leave folk on the street. A case officer dropped by to see subject, who appeared to be in good spirits, but tweaking out, making preparations for a patent on one of his brainstorms. This one was in November, so an early Christmas gift. The CO informed the subject that he could buy a scarf, a hat, and a pair of shoes, and the good guys over at the CIA would pick up the tab. They did end up going downtown, got lunch, and then just started going clothes shopping like a bunch of divas. And Rogue over here was just overwhelmed. He couldn't understand why someone was doing this for him. The case officer explained he was receiving nothing more than any other case they are asked to help. What a bunch of good guys. Unfortunately, one guy visiting you every few days can still let someone go mad. This guy was seeing people in person more than I was, but I'm able to keep the psychosis at bay by being on Discord. I listened to a podcast to simulate the sensation of having a conversation without having to input anything. But the subject was extremely nervous and very upset. He said the apartment was too quiet. It was impossible for him to do work on his inventions. There was no gas stove, no telephone, and the only clothes he had were from the summer clothes he had in the Congo. Now, there's like 100 more pages of this document, and I could keep going. I might if I need to get this video over 10 minutes. But the biggest mistake that somebody made with this is that the entire document is listed by date backwards. You start in 1964, and then by the time you're done with it, you end up in like August 1962. So I've basically just told you the trajectory of their relationship and how they got closer and closer in reverse order. That said, this is just one of the documents me and chat found while streaming, going through the documents, and there was a lot of funny stuff individually to look at. If this video does well and y'all want me to go through that, let me know. Maybe I'll make another video. If not, that kwytebox@gmail.com email is always open if you guys want to send me topics. Anyways, yeah, that's it. Piss off.